I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Skip that again. There was, under open focus session, there was nothing to report on a statement. Item G, public comment on agenda items and non-agenda items. This is the time and place to address the school board. State law prohibits the board from acting on issues not included on the agenda. However, request may be made for discussion of specific topics in subsequent meetings. Upon recognition by the president of the board, please come forward and identify yourself before speaking. The Board of Education reserves the right to limit speaking time to 3 minutes or less per individual. Do I have any speaker cards? Anyone wanting to make public comment? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go on to item H, communications. Student representatives report.
Okay, today was our blood drive for the United Blood Drive Services, and it went really well. Over 55 students and adults donated, and it went really smooth. So we're over by 1:30, and so that took place today. Career Day is coming up this Friday, November 5th. And then I'm going to give a class report for the freshmen. They're working on their fleece blankets, which they will be selling to fundraise for their class account. Our sophomores had a car wash this past weekend, and I heard it went really well as well. They're working on their t-shirts for their class, and they're having their Sadie Hawkins during May, I believe. So around that time. Our SP week, Santa Paula week, is coming up, where we have rallies, anytime activities, and spirit days. That's coming up next week. Our juniors are planning prom. It's going to be at the Statacoy Country Club in May as well. And our seniors are preparing for graduation. They just ordered their announcements, so that's exciting.
How did you see me?
At Mount Sat?
Yes, at Mount Sat.
I did well, and our cross-country team, our cross-country team did really well too.
Oh, good.
Yeah, our coach was really impressed with us. That was a fun day.
And you did your personal best too?
Yeah, I did.
For those who don't know, they're still ranked number 4 after years
Yeah.
science
Yes,
school
we are.
in Southern California.
Wow.
Mount Sac was a really fun day. It was over 14 hours total. We left really early and we got back really late, so it was fun though.
A lot of competition over there.
There was.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah, our varsity team got put in sweepstakes, and so it was really cool to see them. They got to do a run through, and they got to their names announced, and it was really, it was a big deal. So it was really cool.
I don't understand what sweepstakes is.
Sweepstakes, it's a faster paced race,
Oh.
and so it was a really big deal for our team, and so both girls and boys got to participate in that.
Great. Good experience.
Both girls.
Okay. Superintendent's report.
Let's go to Mr. Dr. Bush first.
Just a quick report. The repairs at the high school are progressing, and today it's rumored that we turned on the air conditioning in the office. So they haven't had air conditioning in almost a year in the high school office. So we got some positive emails about that. We are still working on the science building, and all the demolition has been completed. The new boilers are in, but the air handlers, we're waiting for them to arrive, and we're continuing to work with the insurance companies. Although the different insurance policies are haggling, both companies have assured us it is $5,000 deductible to the districts, and Chubb Insurance is going to step forward and cut the checks, and then they're going to fight with the 3 different insurance companies who pays what. So that was very positive. Rio Vista is moving quite rapidly. We're starting framing a whole nother set of buildings. So the left side of the school or the east side of the school, they're now framing. So it's pretty exciting. We no longer have a campground. We finally resolved our camping issue. And the city's pleased with that. So on the budget front, You know, you've probably heard everything, the ups and downs, the maybes, and who knows, and in 6 weeks, we'll know if they're gonna pull the trigger, so. We're waiting, like everyone else, for 6 weeks. And I don't have a clue what pension reform means. A lot of people have been asking, there's a lot of articles, and we're still waiting for the dust to settle. And it seems most of the time when they're talking about pension reform, they're not speaking so much about school district employees, but other municipal employees like in Bell and law enforcement and prison guards who don't pay anything for their pension. So, you know, everyone's very interested in it, but it's only proposals right now. And there's really has not been a proposition written nor a bill written regarding it. But it is an election year and a lot of people are pounding chests. So.
Well, I do want to comment on the facilities and how they look. We have a coach at middle school who comes from a district where I worked in previously, who was extremely impressed with what she had seen in our district, especially middle school. And I have to concur. And today at Sierra, when you see that facility, it's just a beautiful place for our kids to go. And it's lined up, I mean, it's a perfect spot. And it was a beautiful day today, and I'm glad that most board members were able to come. It was really good to watch our kids. And I do have to give credit to Dr. Bush for really putting the effort in to make that a showcase for our kids, as well as the rest of the district. I look at the high school and I'm thinking, what a beautiful place that place is. To the quads and walk through, it just looks really good. Sometimes you don't realize just how good we have it until you really go to a school and they consider not a very good looking school. This school is pretty doggone, right, Mr. Jones?
I agree.
Okay, Michael, I know you have a lot to report.
Yes, I do. And I'm giving this report also, since Todd isn't here.
You want to explain? I'll explain real quickly. Mr. Shefferly's mother was in a car accident shortly before the board started this afternoon. She's okay. She's went to the hospital for a checkup and talked to Todd. And he said I told him to stay with his mother. So that's why he's.
I want to update the board on the activities of the Alternative Governance Board. We completed our visit with the middle school. We were in every classroom. We also met with some of the departments. In fact, most of the departments. We also had a time where we spent talking to kids. We are in the process now of compiling that data, and we'll be giving the board a report in the next 2 to 3 weeks once we have put the data together. Today we started the process with 5 We visited classrooms today, and we'll be spending another day with them next week on Tuesday, where we will complete the classroom visits, meet with the staff, and meet with the students. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, we will be at San Cayetano. So again, we're planning to have a report to the board, hopefully before the end of November, for all 3 visits that we've done. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, and I think it's going to be very productive and very helpful for the schools, because we're setting the baseline data for them. The plan is for us to do some dipstick visits sometime in January, unannounced, just visit classrooms, get an idea of where they are and how they're progressing with some of the recommendations that will be submitted to the board, and we trust the board will approve and they'll start implementing. And then we will do a full-scale visit again sometime in April to see how they have progressed towards the recommendations. We informed them that the AGV process is at a minimum 2-year process. We're going to go through the same process for 2 years. And depending on where they are, it may even extend to a 3rd year for all 3 schools. Because we would like to, assist them and shepherd them to get out of program and grow. So that's our goal. Thank you.
Right.
Oh, we said Yankees.
Okay, so we'll go on to item I, and give my president for that report. Consent agenda items. Items on the consent agenda are considered routine and will be enacted by a single motion. None of the items will be discussed unless a board member or member of the audience requests discussion. I have items 1 through 6. Board members, does anyone want to pull anything from items 1 through 6? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried, 5-0. Action item J, number 7, approved site plans for San Cayetano School and Kaiser School.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Any? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Item K, information discussion items. 8, essential standards, task force report on essential standards and benchmark assessment. Task force facilitator, Mr. Carroll, principal from Sesqui Elementary School.
Before Scott starts, I want to thank my principals who were able to come today. And part of the reason I wanted them to come to every single presentation that you are ahead of, so that everybody in the district hears the same thing at the same time, just in case we need clarification. I think it's important that we all be here. So thank you very much. I know it's a long day, and I appreciate your role provided. And Mr. Schaefer.
Before Mr. Carroll does his presentation, let me just provide the board an overview of where we are and why we are having this presentation tonight. As you know, under the superintendent's leadership, we have formed 9 task forces to address 9 critical areas in the district. We already had the report on pacing guidance, which you heard last month. And Chrissy was the one who gave us that report. This is another task force we have. And this particular task force is focused on essential standards and aligning the testing to the standards, which last year we field tested in English language arts, and this year we're implementing. And this year, in terms of math, we're field testing the benchmarks. And we're hoping that by next year, we will then implement that full blown after we have done the pilot this year. In addition to looking at those 2 benchmark core curriculum areas, we are also looking at other checkpoints for the kids, so that the classroom is informed of where the kids are, formative assessments before they're given the summative assessment, and that's crucial. And so this is the piece that deals with all of that. Although it looks like it's a separate task force, it really is not operating independent of the pacing guidance, because they have to align the testing to the dates in the pacing guides when exams will be given and assessments will be given. In addition to that, it also has to be aligned with a report card, which you will hear a report on the next meeting that we have. And that piece certainly is one that has been talked a lot about, and one that is a major giant step in the district, because that moves us into the 21st century. It is an online report card based on essential standards. It's no longer, math, and then you get a score on math. You don't know whether the kids know all of the skills essential in math. We broke all of those down into skill levels. And therefore the teacher has to then provide, how is this kid doing on skill, whatever it is, numeracy, how is this kid doing? So you've got that broken down. And so it's exciting. It's not been an easy road for us to travel, because it's a major change, and it impacts directly what happens in the classroom. And bless our teachers' heart, they really want to do a good job. But whenever you move into their territory, you begin to change practice. That is very, very difficult. But we can no longer stay behind the time. we have to move forward. And I know that the dialogue is not over, but we're moving forward. This is where we're going, and we want everybody to come on board. So I wouldn't be surprised if, there are some teachers who are still dragging their feet, and I understand that, but our task, if we're going to give a quality education to our kids, is to do what we're doing. Measure them according to what they need to know. Not in general terms, but very specific. And only then can we move kids through the system who are ready and prepared for high school. That's our task. And so now I introduce to you Mr. Scott Carroll.
Thank you.
He'll give you a presentation on essential standards.
Just a couple of piggybacks on what Mr. Johnson said. You're going to hear a lot of things I talk about tonight. We're very similar to what things that Christy talked about and what Jan's going to talk about, and Diana, because like you said, they all go together. Without any piece, everything falls off the table if you lose any pieces. So parts might sound a little repetitive. I'll try to go through those pretty quickly, but you are going to hear a lot of the same terms that you heard from Christy. Also, just to talk about the timelines, this is kind of a side note, is what we found, and we're looking at data from other schools and information from other districts, is a lot of the stuff that we're doing right now, we look at the dates, and other districts did it in 2003, 2004, and so we're seeing that, we'll say, okay, you know what, we really do need to, it's kind of a reminder to us that it's past due, and I'm glad we're doing it and setting up these systems, but really we are behind the times. So we're catching up on kind of fast. I was speed racer at my school and for Halloween, so that's kind of a good definition of what we're trying to do with this here. So, sorry for the side note there. You'll see, I did have 6 packets. Anyone else that wants a packet, I'm more than happy to, but you can see it's about 50 pages, and I killed mini trees already, so if you didn't get a copy and you want a copy of this, I'll be happy to run it off for you. I should have enough for all the board members, and I think an extra.
We could probably put it on the web and let them go ahead and kill trees on their own.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I've killed enough. All right, so my task force is talking about essential standards and assessments. So basically, I'm going to kind of walk you through tonight and talk about how we take our content standards, which we all have been familiar with, and turn those into essential standards and pacing guides and benchmark assessments. So how do we take this giant system that we have and refine it so it's really working for our kids, so we can really make a difference with the kids? That's kind of, I'm going to walk us through that tonight, so I apologize, it's a lot of ground to cover, and I'll try to go at a decent pace. In the packet, the first thing you see is a copy of something you've all seen before, our essential standards. This is just ELA for just 5th grade. And to give you an idea, I just put one in there because I would have killed a lot more trees, so I put them all on there. Just ELA 5th grade has 51 separate ELA standards. And keep in mind, we have 175 instructional days, so even our best teacher is not going to teach 51 standards anywhere near mastery in 175 days. It's not realistic. Keep in mind, these standards were adopted in 1997. Now, certainly, school accountability was coming around at that point, but this is before No Child Left Behind, certainly not to the level we're at today. So while the content standards are important, and we know we need to teach the kids these content standards, we're going to talk about how we refine and how we really realistically look at teaching 51 or less standards to the kids and how we do it effectively. So the content standards, like I said, they're now 14 years old, but they haven't changed. The quantities are huge. So that's where we start dialing it down and getting more specific. Real quick side note, I did put some information about the Common Core standards in there. I know you've all heard about that. It's coming down the pipeline. It was adopted a little over a year ago in the state of California. Depending on who you listen to, it's a 2 to 4 year implementation window. It's going to change what we're doing a lot because it's going to change some of our standards. We're going to have to go back and refine a lot of what we're doing. But the good news is that California already had some, you guys know, some of the most rigorous standards. We don't have as far to go as, say, a Texas or some of the other states. And so we're in a good place with the Common Core standards compared to some of the other states. But that, I don't want to get into too much of that. That's probably a whole other board meeting or 10. But I wanted to put in there some information there about that too, because it really, when we talk about essential standards and content standards, we know that's right around the corner and it's going to change the way we look at things. So kind of as we're going through, this is kind of an awkward.
Just if I could repeat back what I heard you saying. So the core standards that are coming, those are national standards.
They are. That's national standards.
The essential standards that we're going to go through are ones that you have, that the district has deemed are the essential standards out of all the giant range of standards that
Yes.
are available, right?
You're exactly right.
Okay.
And the Common Core, what they did was they wanted to have a national set of standards, but they also wanted to give states a little bit of autonomy. So states were free. I forget if it was 8 or 10%, the exact number, but states were allowed to add a little bit. So California actually added a little bit more than was there. I want to say it's 6 or 8% more. So each state has a little bit of autonomy, but for the most part, it's going to be the same across the country. You're right. So then, since we're all being measured with the same system, it's going to be much more appropriate. It's kind of like a common assessment for the whole country as opposed to all these different assessments. So that's a good point, though. It is a national thing. All right. So talking about essential standards, last year there was a committee in the district. It was K through 5. I was not part of that committee because I was at the secondary level at that time, but they went through and they identified essential standards, K-5 for all our elementary schools. And you see them in there. I included them in there. You can see that depending upon the standards, some are essential standards 1 trimester, some are 2. Some of them are big standards that might be across all 3 trimesters. This was and still is an issue that we're talking about is making sure we're putting things in the right place. Does it make sense to teach it in trimester 1 or should we bump it to trimester 2? That's one of the things that my committee needs to look at this year as assessment results come in. Certainly we're not going to change in the middle of the game, but it's something we're looking at. I think it's one of those things that you're always refining and you're always trying to make it better. So while I don't think we change in the middle of the year, it's certainly if we find a hole in our essential standards, we're going to address that. So moving forward, it makes more sense. I've already heard a couple of those on our math, things that we need to look at. So it's certainly something we're looking at all the time. So when you talk about essential standards or power standards or essential learning, they have lots of different phrases. There's a couple different ways that districts go about identifying them, and it's not the same in every district. When we look at essential standards, we'll see a lot of ours, most of ours in fact, line up with other districts, but there are some differences between districts. I would say the ones we look at, probably 80% or so of ours line up directly with other districts. So each district's a little bit different. I'm going to talk about kind of some different ways that you can identify essential standards. Briefly, you can see I put it in there. Jump forward here. All right, there's a page that says essential learning. Sorry, let me zoom in a little bit for those of you that don't have all of it. Doug Reeds and Marzano are a couple of the foremost educational researchers on essential standards and really kind of dialing down and giving those power standards. So one of the things that we look at and other districts look at is this kind of 3-pronged test that Reeves has developed, talking about, is a skill essential? Is it essential standard? We know we have 51 in 5th grade. How do we get down to 10 or 12 really important ones, which is what they say we should have, 10 to 14 per year, so 5 to 6 per semester. One of them Reeves talks about is, does it have endurance? Is this something that we're going to teach a student in April, they take a test on it in May, and then they're free to forget it? If so, it's probably not that essential a standard. If it's not something worth teaching and spiraling through and making sure students understand it for the long haul, it's not essential. The second test is, does it have leverage? So this kind of gets to, does it go across curricular areas? So in language arts, I know, for example, in 5th and 6th grade, they start writing research papers and expository papers. Well, we know that might be a language arts standard, but when they get to middle school and high school, they also need to be able to do that for science, for social studies. Those go across the guide, and we know when they get to college, that's most of the grade is going to be that. So that's an example of things that have leverage. It's not just in isolation. It has importance all the way across different curriculums and different time spans. The last one is, does it develop student readiness for the next level of learning? This is really important. If there's very few standards, especially ones that we feel are important, that are taught in isolation for 1 year. Usually they build upon themselves. For example, I was a 6th grade teacher, and that's when we really start digging into algebra. They start algebra far earlier than 6th grade. They do little pieces of it. By 6th grade, though, they're solving multi-step equations, multiple variables, things that they've learned, they've kind of built up to. So when you talk about readiness for next level learning, we're developing that in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. So it's one of those things that goes along. So this 3-pronged test is one of the ways that we look at identifying essential standards. And this is the other one. Well, not the other one, there's other ones, but this is a real common one. This is the CST blueprints. And this is basically kind of our guide to know what's on the CST. We know that not everything is based on the CST, but it's a pretty darn important measure for us. It's how we measure ourselves. It's how we're measured by the state of California. It's what goes in the newspaper. These are supposed to be based on the most important standards. So when we go through here, you can see, this is once again 5th grade, so there's the 51 different things in here. But we can look through and find out what's most prevalent on the test and what's not. So for example, if we look at the first section here, the subset or the main section is word analysis, fluency, systematic vocabulary developments. Some things are hard to test. Like for example, this one right here, not assessed. That means that it's not on the CST, or it's ingrained in other areas, but it's really not tested. But if we go down here and look at this one has 5 questions on it. Vocabulary and concept development, so understanding synonyms, antonyms, things like that. As opposed to the one right above it, determining the meaning of unknown words using origins is only 2 questions. Now, any 5th or 6th grade teacher will tell you it's important to learn word origins, but we can assume that in this case, this one's going to be a more important standard. What we'll find out is a lot of times standards that might not be a powered standard in 5th grade might be introduced in 5th grade. They might go a lot more in depth in another grade, or 2nd grade or 3rd grade. So just because it's not tested in the CST in a particular year doesn't mean it's not important at some point during the year. It just means it's not one of the main focuses for that year. So we look at this. It's another thing we look at for the CST. Let me find some examples here. Some things are pretty hard to test on the CST. It's hard to fit things in a ABCD format sometimes. That's one of the things that the Common Core is going to change, is they're going to have some open-ended questions. There's going to be room for student response. It's not going to be all multiple choice. If you look through here, writing strategies, you see it's a little bit harder to identify essential standards because there's 1 or 2 that are pretty consistent. There's not one that jumps out at you and says, oh, we need to spend a lot more time on that one. When you look at the last page here, here's an example though. Research and technology, it's a 5th grade standard. It's not assessed because that's pretty darn hard to assess in ABCD formats, at least in an effective way. But revising, writing, and editing, that's a 5-question one. So off the top of my head, I don't know, but I would guess there's very likely that's an essential standard. So that's kind of one way. There's lots of other ways to look at it, but that's one of we've done as a district and what other districts have done. I don't think there's any right or wrong way to do it, as long as you're looking at the 3 questions we talked about, as long as you're looking at what's best for students, so we don't spend, really this kind of guides our instructional time. It goes with our pacing guide. We're not going to spend 2 weeks talking about something that might be 2 questions on the CST. That might be something that might be 6 questions the next year, and they'll spend more time on it. Now, I don't want to make it sound like we don't hit those, because we hit all 51 standards if we're using our curriculum correctly, but we know that we're going to hit the 12 to 14 a lot more with a lot more strength. We might spend a week on it instead of 1 day on it. So, all right, so moving on, the next part is talking about assessment. So we talked about standards, then we kind of nailed it down to essential standards, and so we know what we want our kids to learn, but the next question is, how do we know if our kids learned it? How do we test that? And this is, I think, talking about all the systems that we're putting in place, this might be the most important one. Because, and this was not unique to elementary, I was in the middle school, in the same small school, it was the same way. In the elementary levels, we might have teachers at some sites using reading lines for assessments, some are using open court tests, some are using district-created tests, some are using teacher-created tests. What that did is, it didn't allow us to ever have apples and apples to compare. We might say, a teacher might say, well, my kids did great on my open court test. Walk next door, they might have said, my kids did great in the reading lines test, but we could never compare those scores because they're totally different things. Testing oftentimes very different standards. So talking about assessments, there's a couple main kinds. The key word there is common. We want to make sure we're giving the same assessment everywhere. A 5th grader at San Cayetano is taking the same test as a 5th grader at Sespe or Mountain Vista or Piru. So formative assessments, I think the easiest way to think about this is, I've heard this analogy a few times, is to think about going to the doctor. A formative assessment would be your exam, your physical you go to. And the doctor, if I go every year, and he'll tell me, you know what, you could lose a couple pounds and you probably should eat a little better, get a little more exercise. That's my guide, that's his standards. A formative assessment is kind of the same thing for our kids. It's the dipstick along the way, so we know, as of today, this is how well the student is doing. They might be doing great on this standard, they're struggling a little bit more here, but that's how we find out. So these are not things that go in report cards. This is for students to find out what they need to reteach. We have intervention at all our sites with RTI, it might be the focus of that. So these are the assessments that are happening on a frequent basis. Not part of the grade, just mostly for teachers to know what they need to reteach, what they need to focus on. This is where actually, you probably heard talk about the Reading Lions, which is one of the common assessments, formative assessments that we're now giving district-wide that are taking the place of that open court, of the teacher-created assessment, all the different potpourri of stuff that we're using. This is one example here. This is a 5th grade one, again, trying to be consistent. You can see it's ABCD formats. It's a skills-based test, so that means it's not teaching specific standards. What we can do is we can actually disaggregate the data. We go into DataWise, and most of these are in DataWise already. So if I went into DataWise, I could tell you what the standard for question 1 was. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's already in there. So when the kids take these tests, even though they're skills-based tests, we can disaggregate the data and say these 12 kids struggled on standard 1.2. These 14 struggled here, these 6 struggled here. But also what it allows us to do is start looking at best practices across the district. So we can look at, instead of looking at just my classroom and maybe the classroom next to me, we can say, well, how did the Piru 4th graders do in comparison to the San Cayetano 4th graders? How did this one teacher at SESP have these great results? What did she do? What did he do to get those results? We want to go in and see what's happening. So it starts those conversations so we can really figure out. We couldn't really do that before because everyone was giving different tests. I mean, it's kind of like if you go to DMV and Lucy has a 10-question test and I take a 50-question test and I say, hey, I got 30 rights. And so it didn't make sense. So this kind of lines us in the same pace. These are, depending upon the grade, some grades have as little as 3 of these per year. That would be kinder. Most of them are 6 to 8 per year. So it's not something they're doing all the time, but it's frequent enough that we can get good data on it.
Where does that come from?
This is actually, it's put out by, it's the Sacramento County Office of Education. It's designed especially for schools who are using Open Court 2002, which we have. Actually, it says it right on here. That's what it's for schools using Open Court Reading 2002. So it's actually specifically for our program. It aligns, because with our new pacing guide, we're focusing more on standards and not teaching the stories as much as the standards. We have to do a little bit of alignment with it. I mean, it's what we found. We looked around. We found it was the best tool. It's actually what a lot of districts with similar demographics and similar and the same adoption as us are seeing a lot of success with it. One of them was Desert Sands down in I think it's in Imperial Valley. I'm not sure where it's at, but they've had a lot of success with this. And so there's a lot of data out there that helped us because there was lots of stuff, lots of resources that went with this program. When we looked, it was really what we found was the most effective with the program that we have right now. We'll see. This year, the numbers should start coming in the next couple of weeks. We'll have teachers starting to give Unit 2 tests, and we'll start to look at the data. Certainly, I don't think there is any perfect test, but we've heard some real good feedback from this. And actually, some of our schools were already using this, and they got some good feedback from it too. So we hope that it's going to be kind of that conversation starter, and it's going to be we get away from having hunches about how our kids are doing and start having data about how they're doing.
When you say that test measures what schools that look like us is measuring. Okay, that's one area of assessment and evaluation. Now, our kids are going to be competing with kids that come from white upper middle class, white middle class communities. How will that correlate with what other schools like Thousand Oaks,
sure.
Simi Valley?
And I think when I said that, I should have kind of said it's more to do with schools that are using Open Court.
Okay.
But the districts that we looked at, like Desert Sands, many of them did look like us. Whether that was a coincidence or not, I don't know. But that's more what we looked at was we wanted to find schools who are using the same adoption we have and having some success with it. So to answer your question, though, I think that's where our standards-based assessment is going to make a big difference. Because now we're no longer just measuring our kids against our kids, we're measuring our kids against the standards, and they're a lot more factual based. I mean, it's not, like I said, we're trying to get away from the hunches, and I feel like this kid is doing well, this student is succeeding here. We want the data to see that student is succeeding so we can make changes if they're not. So that was a good question, Tony. So I think it's more about districts that have the same adoptions that we do and the same resources that we do. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. The other kind of assessment is the summative. You've heard that analogy before. If the first one was the physical exam where you go to the doctor, this one's the autopsy. It's the end of learning assessment. Our ultimate summative assessment is the CST. That's the one we prepare for all year long. We hope our kids do well on. But we also have some other ones in the district. We have our district trimester ones, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Summative, though, is exactly what it says. It's the summary of how we did. CSTs, we know that once we take the test, we have to sit around and wait till August to get the results. Summative, actually, even though we call this summative, our trimester tests in the first and second trimester, really, we can still go back and reteach. We have intervention programs, we have reteaching. So it's summative, but at the same time, it also gives us more data so we can go back and start working with smaller groups of those kids. So it's summative, it's summative because it goes on the report card, it's part of our grading system, but it's not summative so much that we're not going to try to do something with the results and hopefully benefit the kids in the end. So. And I just want to show you an example. Some examples of our summative test. This is a district writing test, just about all our grades. I don't think Kinder does. I think all the rest take a writing test. So every trimester they have a writing test. They have a writing test, a multiple choice English language arts test, and this year we're piloting a multiple choice math test. So this is an example of the writing one. So the student would write it, the teacher would grade it, and based upon the rubric would give them a grade. This is the multiple choice version of our summative test. This is all created in DataWise. These are the ones that we do roughly about now, October, November-ish, February, March, and then at the end of the year. And you can see actually these look a lot like the reading lines in some ways. There's some reading passages. This is what the Scantron looks like. This is, regardless of what DataWise test you're taking, it's going to look real similar to this. I stole this from Mount Vista, don't tell them. Here is one of the things that my task force worked on was developing timelines. If we're going to give assessments and give the same assessments, we have to give them at the same time. If Virginia and I can give the same test, but if I give it in September and she gives it in November, we're going to have different results. So we said we have to be a little more streamlined. We have to be specific as to when we're going to give it. Plus, it helps us stay in that pacing guide which we're developing as well. So my task force, along with Connie, she's the one that made it pretty. It's much prettier than mine. You'll see in a minute. This is the schedule for our district trimester, our summative tests for the whole entire year. So for example, you can look right here, Thursday, November 3rd. So this Thursday, this is kindergarten. They have their deadline to return their tests to Connie in the district office to scan. You can see it's a little bit different depending on the grade level, 3 through 5, first and second. The reason it's different is because that nice Scantron that you saw, this nice easy one here, when 5th grade tests and 4th grade and 3rd grade come in, their whole entire test is on one Scantron like that because those kids are bubbling. Our K, our 1, and our 2, they're much more intensive. A lot of times the teacher's filling it in. Sometimes it's one-on-one with the student. So we need more time to get the results. So they have to test a little bit earlier in the trimester. Just logistically, it's more of a human issue. We need to make sure that if we want to get our test results back quickly, which we need to do, we can't give them all to Connie at the same time and say, here, scan 3,000 tests in the next 2 days, go. Doesn't make sense. So they are spread out a little bit, but we do have timelines for, you'll see all 3 trimesters. So for example, you'll see if you look at grades, this is grades 3 through 5. November 2nd. So tomorrow, our 5th grade, our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers should all be giving their language arts trimester 1 multiple choice test. Some have chosen to do it maybe a day earlier, like for example at my site, on Wednesday we have a science sub that comes in, so they said, well, can we give it on Tuesday? And I said, one day, okay, we can live with that, no problem. We just can't give it late because then we have to wait for results for the whole district. So this is what it looks like. It's a little bit difficult to read, I'll acknowledge that. I'll show you what I'm trying to do to make it a little easier. So this is only our summative tests. I know lots of stuff going on here, sorry. What I decided as a teacher, former teacher not too long ago, is that if I want to be organized and give the same test, which I wanted to do as a teacher, but I also wanted to make sure I was doing it on the right time and using deadlines. But I wanted everything on the same sheet of paper. I didn't want to look at this sheet of paper for the summative assessment, this sheet of paper for the reading lines, this sheet of paper for the writing. So what I'm trying to do, as Chrissy's pacing guide committee works, and they're starting to finish up some of the grades now, is I'm putting it all on one sheet of paper. Here is the 5th grade assessment guide for the whole entire year. You can see it has the writing test on there, the multiple choice, all the reading lines. This is already actually posted on the CESTI website. I wanted to do it on one sheet of paper to make it a little more manageable. If we're asking teachers to give all these tests and get all this data for us, I at least wanted to make it was a little bit easier for them to kind of navigate that. So my hope is that the next week or two I'll have these for all the grades. I already have 2nd and 5th done, and there's a couple more that are finished up that I need to get this done for. So this is something that teachers will all have. We posted on our website. My hope is that it gets posted on the district website as well. I'm working with Connie on that. But to me, this is a much easier way to read it than to have 2 or 3 different pieces of paper with all the different timelines on it.
Now, when kids are taking these tests, they're bubbling them, right?
For the most part, yes. Grades, really, grades 3, 4, 5, even grades 2 for the most part, they are bubbling them, yes. And we talked about that, 3rd grade, our debate was, well, we're not sure how well they're going to bubble. And we said, well, you know what? They need to learn how to bubble. It's a test-taking skill. They're going to be taking tests from now until the time they're out of college and probably after that. So we said, well, you know what? Let's use this as a learning experience. We need to start bubbling anyways. They're going to bubble their own CSTs in May. So for the most part, it is. The only exception would be in kinder and 1st grade where they're giving tests recognizing letters and doing individual things where they're working one-on-one with the student. The teacher a lot of times is recording those.
Now what about the 4th and 5th graders? Do you have a problem like sometimes at the high school level? I'm not sure at the middle school because I don't have that experience. But then all of a sudden you have these kids that want to make a pattern with the bubbles.
I
How do you prevent that if it does happen?
And I think part of one of the strengths of this is that since it's running through the classroom teacher, it's not something that we just put in a box and send away. My hope would be that since the data is so important to us, as they come in, I mean, I can't imagine being a classroom teacher and not taking a look at it. Usually we get in the habit of doing that anyways because we want to clean up in case they answer to, or kind of, make sure they're, make a learning process along the way. So I think if that did happen, not that it would ever happen, right? When it happens, I think that's a point for us, to stop and talk to that student and hopefully work with them, because if we can catch that in November with one of these, it's better than not catching it with the high school exit exam or our CSTs. So I wish I could say it never happens, but I think
Well, what I'm getting at is, I mean, the teacher's going to be more a facilitator, roaming the classroom and observing, rather than just going back to their desk and sitting there and let the kids take the test and time limit's up. Okay, let me collect and pass them forward.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. What's that? Exactly, that's a good point, because when we're sharing results more than ever, I mean, our teachers already take a huge amount of pride in making sure their kids are doing their best, and then it just ups the ante even one more when we're saying, okay, how's this room doing compared to this room? And not in a negative way, but in a let's learn from each other kind of way. So I think teachers really want to make sure they're getting the most accurate results from their kids too. So absolutely. All right, so talking about these tests, we've identified the essential standards, we've identified how we're going to test them, we've identified when we're going to test them. The big question though is, what do we do with all this information we're gaining? Because if we don't do anything with the information, it's all kind of a big waste of time. So with that, let me show you some reports. And data-wise, if you're familiar with it, I'm probably underestimating when I say 500 different reports you can run. There's probably literally thousands of all these different kind of combinations. I want to show you a couple reports in data-wise. This is certainly not an exhaustive look at it because there's so many different reports. It's going to be, we'll have standard ones at sites. A teacher can go in and run their own report and find out things they want to find. It's very, very fluid the way you can do it. So I just kind of ran a couple samples here of what to do or what the information looks like. So you can see these are the student names down here. I know it's kind of hard to see. Let me zoom in a little bit more here. Oh, wrong one. This actually shows by question. See question 1, 2, 3. It shows the standard. It shows the overall class percentage correct on that question. So for example, I highlighted here question number 8. Only 14% of the class got it correct. That's number sense 2.1 in this math test. If you look down here, it's also color-coded. The orangish there is the most incorrectly guessed. It's the answer that was wrong that was the most prominently guessed. So in this case, 61% of the students on question 8 thought the answer was A, and in fact it was B. And you see actually that the right answer was the third most popular. Question C had 22%. We call these distractors, questions that get in the way. This gives a lot of information to a teacher. When you can look and know, well, all my students thought, well, 61% at least thought that this was the right answer. What, is it wrong? Is it a bad question? You look at the question. Did I not do a good job of teaching that? Is there a better way I can do it? There's a million things that come into play, but it really kind of opens the conversation where before we might look at, okay, this student got a 16 out of 20. They got a B. They did okay. But we didn't kind of fine-tune this much into it. If you look down below here, this actually breaks it down by student. And it shows you all these letters here are questions that students got wrong. So you could very easily, when you go back to question number 8 here, and you see that 61% that were distracted by letter A, you can go down here and you could actually make a small group of all the kids that guessed A, pull them back to a table and say, okay, we all said A. Let's go through it together and see why we got that answer. So you can do that. You can also see, let me show you another report here. This is another color-coded one. And the pink would correspond to far below basic or below basic. The yellow would be basic. And when you get into the greens, you're starting to talk closer to proficiency. This is really important because you can see this student up here who scored 25% overall, but they were not doing too bad at reading comprehension. But look at this right next to it. Literary response analysis, they got 0. They didn't get any questions right at all. This can really help you when you start fine-tuning your small groups, your reteaching, your RTI time. You can look at these groups. It's also really good not only for your low students, but you can go down here and look at some of your students that are approaching proficient and see, oh, they did great here, but look at this, 17%, so they still have some holes, and right here, 31%, they still have some holes in what they're doing. So it kind of gets away from, well, this student got a B+ on the test, they did a good job. We can be more specific and say, well, they got a B+, but if we look at these two areas, we might take that student from proficient to advanced, or maybe bump up to proficient if they're basic. So it's just, there's many, many reports. You can drill down so specifically. You could run reports for a whole day and not have all of them. It's a matter of finding the report that works best for you for what you're looking for. But it's really, like I said, getting away from the whole overall grade and starting to look specifically at standards, which is exactly what our new report cards are doing as well. So it all kind of plays together. Let's see. So kind of the last thing is, that's the report. So obviously, like I said before, if we don't do anything with the data, if we don't look at it and rearrange our classes and rearrange the way we teach and rearrange times during the day, it's all for naught. And we can look at data all day long, but until we start responding to it, we're not really doing the students any favor. So it's really now, it's hard work. Getting the data is hard, but actually using the data in a useful way, it makes it even more difficult. So moving on, the next steps in my task force, we've got a lot done, but we have a long ways to go still. One is to monitor the district trimester math pilot. It's brand new, it was developed last year, so it's not going to be in report cards this year. What we're going to do as a committee, as a task force, is when those results come in, look at it and go through, just like we did right here on this other report. We'll go through question by question and make sure our questions are good. Make sure that we don't have some bad questions. We can fix them out, change them out if we need to. Look at the overall test. Maybe we need to add more questions. So we need to look at that pilot, get some feedback from teachers and find out what they like, what they didn't like, what we can do to make that a little bit better. So hopefully next year we'll have full implementation of our math trimester test. We also need to finish piloting our district trimester ELA test for the third trimester only. First two trimesters have been piloted last year. They're ready to go. We're fully implementing them. The third one, though, still needs some work. So we're looking at that this year. I need to finish developing the assessment timelines. That's those easier to read sheets that have all the tests on one page. Like I said, hopefully in the next week or two I'll have those all done and get those posted. One thing that falls in the site principles is we're putting all these systems in place and all these timelines. Part of our job now is to monitor and make sure that people are adhering to those timelines. Because as soon as we start slipping on that, then once again we're in a situation where it's not equitable. Our data doesn't matter as much because we have partial data or kind of faulty data. So as site principals, it's our job to make sure that we're monitoring the implementation of those as well. And last of all, like I said, my goal is to hopefully the next couple of weeks have all of this information as far as the assessment timelines posted on the district website. It's on my website now, but I know not everyone knows to go to SESB for staff. So I'm working with Connie, and once we're all done, it's not a big job even on the district website, assuming Michael and Dr. Chanel, I don't think they have any objections at that. So, all right. So that was lots of information. Happy to answer any questions you have.
My first principalship, I was looking at all the test scores. We had a computer program back in 84, and it did an item analysis. Now I was going through my test scores, my third grade, because that was a proficiency grade. That means that's when law came in. If you didn't pass your proficiency test, you're not supposed to be moved to the next grade. That's pretty important. So I looked at the test scores, and I'm looking at what they had to learn. And I look at parts of the book. Okay. And I had 10% of my third graders that were able to know what an author was, what a title was, what a copyright was, or what an illustration was. And I said, 10%, there's something wrong. So I called my third grade group in and I said, can you help me out? I said, what are the parts of the book? Is that hard to teach? He said, no. So I said, have you looked at your test scores? And they said, well, generally, the overall result, yes. I said, did you look at what your kids missed? I said, we have a program that allows you to look at an item analysis to find out, like Scott showed, what were the most missed or the most correct answers. They said, no. I said, let me show you. So I put it on the short. And they said, what's it look like? It's parts of the book. You know what they said? Oh, we don't want our kids in bed? And I said, no. It says, we never taught. So here is why pacing guides is so important. A part of what is going to make the kid be promoted to the next grade level, the teacher didn't even give the information out to the kids. And so I thought, you think that's fair? And they said, no. So I said, well, we can never get to it. I said, I'll tell you what you should do. You don't have to go page 1 to page 80. You go page 1, page 50, page 20 on the base card, so you can cover those areas that the kid's going to be held accountable for. We are one of the only organizations that make it a secret of what you're supposed to know to pass the test. It's a secret. I said, what's wrong? If you want to be an attorney, here's your test. If you want to board, you want to be a doctor, here's what you have to know. It's like we have to guess what you're supposed to know. So I think what we're looking at now is how do we use data to drive instruction to make sure our kids can be successful when they go to the next level. Our charge is to make sure our kids are exposed to the things that they be held accountable, even when they're out of school. And so I think this kind of committees that were put together, Michael had took some committees and actually made more committees, but I think we'll get very, very good information. And I do appreciate the principle that it's hard enough to run a school, but to take on another piece of that for the district is, I think, is remarkable, and I really do appreciate the work that you're putting in as you have to go through this process. But at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure all these things make sense. So they're not just in isolation, that when these things all of a sudden start to meld into one big ball over here, it'll be exactly what our kids need to be successful. And it's been my experience that that's what it takes. And I think, and I congratulate the teachers and the principals for putting the effort forward to make that happen. It is not an easy chore. So, Michael, any comment? You're going to give 3 more committees now, right?
No, I think, Alan, I want to just reiterate what you said about our administrators. They have really taken on these responsibilities very seriously, and they have been doing an excellent, excellent job moving the agenda forward, and without any exception. And I do know that the district will be better prepared in preparing our students, when they graduate from high school, once all these pieces are put together. And it's so crucial also that these ed services, and I know the board is very supportive, the superintendent certainly is very supportive, that we need to support all those pieces. In other words, it's everything is interconnected, it's a system. And therefore, we cannot have one piece fall off, and say, that's not needed. We've got to stay with what we're doing. We've done it that way, why should we change? No, everything has to fit together. Only then can the whole system work and work for the benefit of our students. So that's a very, very crucial piece. Because as we move forward with all of these task forces and addressing all the systems, I am certain, because it's not the first time that Dr. Nishina and I have been involved with change, that there are some who are going to say, why move forward? It's been working the way it's been working, but the way the old system has been working doesn't fit the new system. It has to move together. And that is where we're thankful for the support the board has given us, and certainly the superintendent has given the charge to me to make sure that all the pieces fit.
At our math workshop that we had, and I think Dave and Lucy were there, the presenter talked about a daughter watching the mother cook a pot roast. And the mother looked at the pot roast and cut off this end and cut off that end and stuck it in the oven. And the daughter said, well, why did you do that? And the mother said, because my mother did it. So why don't you go ask your grandmother? So she goes to the grandmother and says, Grandma, Mom says she cuts this piece off the roast beef and this piece off of this end and put it in the oven. You taught her that. Why did you do it? She goes, that's because my mother did it. So go talk to your great-grandma. So she goes to great-grandma and she goes, Great-grandma, your daughter said she cut this end off my grandma and cut this end off, put it in the oven. My mother said she did the same thing. Can you tell me why you did that? She said, yes, because it wouldn't fit in the oven. Because a pot roast was too big to fit in the oven. So we just do things because that's how we've done it in the past. No questioning why, we just do it. So part of the in-service, which Phil was trying to get across, is there's other ways to teach math than the way you may have been taught. And you have to free the mind of the kid to take a look at what works for him. I do my addition differently. Instead of carrying, I just add a number to the bottom. If you've ever done addition, if I have 9 and there's 8, instead of saying put a 1 over here, I just took 9, 8, and added 1 to the bottom. And it's the exact same thing as the test. And it comes out so much quicker. That's how I learned how to add. Because my 5th grade teacher said, try it this way. I don't think I'm the only one that tried it that way. But I tell you what, I was a wizard doing that kind of stuff. So it's not just one way to teach, not one way to learn. And I think the data will prove that as our teachers start to experiment with this and get accustomed to looking at data to drive instruction, they'll say, wow, my kids, now I know how they've been doing what I'm doing very well. And that's the goal, to help our teachers become better at what they do in their craft. It's not to change, it's to make things better so they can help our kids become better students. So, and I think Michael and I have been through this, and we think that our teachers are very good at what they do. And we're going to help, hopefully, make it a little better. And that's our goal. And I do want to again thank the principals. I know what it is as a principal, when they said you have one more, other duties as assigned. You have one more job to do. And what's sort of hard for me was when you did a good job, you just kept adding on. So we're going to try not to do that. You know, you find a really good person, because I've had teachers that said to me, well, I'll just do a bad job and you won't ask me anymore. If you ever heard that before, I'll just do a bad job, then you will never ask me anymore. And so, but I do congratulate you, I do appreciate it, the hard work and coming tonight and hearing what your colleagues have to say and supporting what they have to say. I think is very important in what we're trying to accomplish here for our kids in Fillmore.
How we do it on materials, one school to the next,
Oh, yes, definitely.
So since we're using common assessments on both
That's correct.
the same from one side to the next.
That's right. That's what we started with, aligning the adopted materials by the board, making sure that all the schools are implementing open core with fidelity. It's a little rough for some of the teachers, because again, they've been used to the old system, and you folks have been teachers know that it's difficult for some of them. But those are the ones who really need the support. And because, you know, in the end, the whole system benefits from it. And we're all looking at the same test scores, we're all looking at the same results. And the conversations are going to become more substantive because of it. And, you know, the goal again is to make sure that we know where the best practices are, who are the ones doing, you know, a great job with our kids, so that we can use them as models. You know, because we have a pocket of excellence in the district, and we've seen that, and we've got to capitalize on it. So, thank you.
Any other questions?
Good job, Scott.
Thank you for that, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
It was great, very informative. I know you put a lot of work into that.
Thank you.
We can, do you need these back?
No,
Is
you
that
can keep
okay?
that. Those are yours.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You can't bring the tree back.
Well, no, we can't. That's what I mean. I didn't know if he was going to share these with any others, so, all right. Where are we? So we're on, okay, we're going to move on to item L, student discipline. I have item 9, student expulsions. So, guess I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to move that we accept the recommendations of the staff to take the expulsions with suspensions on both of the student cases, 1112-02 and 1112-03.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried 5-0. Next one, L10, student readmits. Will entertain a motion?
Okay, I'd like to move that, that we accept the district staff's recommendation to readmit student case number 10-11-01, and student case 09-10-19.
Okay. And, take the second.
Second.
Okay, I'd like roll call on this, please. For myself, Board Member Prado,
Aye.
Rangel,
Aye.
Bernita,
Aye.
Board Member Wild.
Aye.
So we have a unanimous, so all those in favor are ayes, so we have 5-0. Okay, we're gonna move on to item M, future meetings, which will be November the 15th, December the 6th, January the 17th, February the 7th, all to begin 5:30 closed session to have a regular meeting at 6:30. Does anyone have any conflicts at the moment?
Another conflict, just we should probably add in there that we will be meeting for CSBA.
That's right. December
First and second.
First, second?
Is that right? First and second, right?
First and second, December for the school board conference in San Diego. All right, so at the moment, it looks like everyone's okay with these dates. If anything changes, you'll let us know. And then I guess we will move on to board closing comments in the agenda building.
Just a question, we only have one meeting in January.
Oh,
Usually we have two meetings. Is that because the first Tuesday falls on a holiday? On the first, probably.
If you want another one, go ahead.
oh.
Just curious. I'm suggesting just curious.
I guess we would get closer if that being necessary, we'll make some changes there.
Principals are going, oh.
Okay, and anything else? Any comment? No? Okay, well, then I will remind you, we will be adjourning into closed session to finish business. So, and item O, I will entertain a motion to adjourn and close.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And motion carried 5-0. And we are out of break.